Hello, and welcome to the Garuda Talk. Very warm welcome to François Gautier. Well, good to have you on the show, François.
Thank you, Sankrant.
And François has, of course, written many books with Garuda. I'm going to just show a sampler of some of the books. So one of the first books he wrote with us was this book, An Entirely New History of India. Very, very important book, because we have to really take back the writing of our history. And François is bringing both a journalistic perspective as well as an Indic perspective to history, all the way up to contemporary events, including the Ayodhya Janambhoomi movement and the restoration of the Ram Temple. Then one of the books we'll be talking about today is this book on Aurangzeb. Absolutely stunning and beautifully illustrated book. We'll be going through that. So the illustrations are really worth watching. And this is the most recent book he wrote, which is India, Hindus, and Narendra Modi. So again, it's just wonderful to have you, François. And there have been a lot of contemporary talk about the Aurangzeb has come up again in discourse. I think Pranav might have a little video for us to see on what's been happening in Nagpur and other places. Pranav, if you want to run that.
बाहर से आए लोगों ने पत्थरबाजी की है, गाड़ियां फोड़ी है, घरों तक आग लगाई है, गांधी बाग सागर बैंक उस पर पत्थरबाजी किया। इस मुख्यमंत्री जी से मेरी मांग है कि जिन्होंने ये सब किया प्लानिंग के साथ, उन सभी को कड़क शासन होना चाहिए, ऐसी मेरी मांग है।
So, François, why is Aurangzeb such a big polarizing figure even today? And you've, of course, done so much work on this topic. Give us some context about what's happening here.
The Aurangzeb is relevant today because the type of Islam, very strong, pure, rigid, intolerant Islam, which he actually pioneered during his rule. He lived till he was nearly 89 years old, so he lived for a long time. And he actually, we'll come to that later, but he actually wasn't the heir of the Mughal Empire. This Islam is very much present today. It made a comeback. And you could say that Aurangzeb's legacy has come alive today, and the riots in Nagpur are an example on how Muslims, unfortunately, ordinary Muslims, are today realizing Aurangzeb's dream of a world dominated by the Sharia and Islam. So Aurangzeb is relevant today, not because he was a good person, because actually he was the tyrant. He was a Hitler in his own time, not only Hitler towards Hindus, but also towards his own family. As you know, he imprisoned his father, Shah Jahan, the builder of Taj Mahal, who was not as good as Akbar, but was actually a better, more tolerant ruler than Aurangzeb himself. He beheaded his brother Darashuko, who was a remarkable Sufi saint who thought that Islam had roots in Christianity and Hinduism also, because he, as you know, he translated the Upanishads and was a follower of Vedanta, actually. He imprisoned his own son, he killed his brothers. He was a monster. He was a monster. But he was a very strict Muslim, and not only towards others, but himself was a very pious Muslim. He used to knit these Muslim caps himself, used to copy the Quran by hand. So he was a very rigid and pious Muslim himself. So the type of Islam that he enforced upon India spread towards South Asia. You find it today in Pakistan among the Sunnis. You find it today in Afghanistan with the Taliban. You find it today with Daesh and so many other people in so many countries. Hamas is a enforcer of Aurangzeb's, diktat. What Hamas did to Israel, I mean, they just put to the letter what the Quran says and what Aurangzeb swore by. So for me, Aurangzeb is a monster, but unfortunately, although the Mughals only reigned for 3 centuries, there's a fascination in the not only in Western ideologies, but even in India. I'm writing a book, a biography of Dara Shikoh at the moment for a French publisher, and the books I read on the biographies written on Dara Shikoh by Hindus themselves. You can see the admiration for Aurangzeb. You can see the admiration for the Mughal Empire. So that nostalgia of the Mughal Empire is something that is enduring in India also. So it's a very complicated problem, actually. The riot that happened in Nagpur, it's a long, it has a long history, and it's a clash between, the civilized world and an Islam that we'd like to belong to the past, but it doesn't.
Absolutely, and I think there's Abu Azmi. It's not just some mobs on the street. There Muslim leaders in India belonging to major political parties who are claiming, Aurangzeb was a great man, and of course, as you said, he's a pious Muslim, and somebody's even called him a unifier. He's a unifier of India. And
that's a joke. That's a joke. You're joking,
right?
Yeah, you're joking.
Yeah, but well, they're not joking because that's what they're saying. That's what the claims they're making. And
how did he unify India? Do you know that Aurangzeb actually, not only was against Hindus, but against, he had beheaded a Jewish saint called Sarmad. He raised Buddhist. Nobody spoke about today, but he was against Jainism, he was against Buddhism, he was against Judaism. He was an absolutely intolerant emperor. How did he unify India? After he died, the emperor, the Mughal Empire started disintegrating. His legacy, I think,
he set the stage. He set the stage for the disintegration.
Right. He set the stage for disintegration because there were revolts everywhere. Even amongst Muslims, they revolted against Aurangzeb because his rule was absolutely an iron, intolerant rule. So he actually was not a unifier. His own empire crumbled because he provoked so many revolts. He humiliated the Hindus so much. As you know, on the cover of my book on Aurangzeb, Aurangzeb had the habit of destroying Hindu temples or Buddhist temples or Jain temples, and he would bury the murtis under the steps of the mosque that he would build upon the temple that he had raised, so that generations of Muslims would trample upon. So he was a very intelligently vicious emperor, an intelligently vicious emperor. I'm sorry that there's so few historians who have had the courage to say that, and I'm very sorry that in India, that fascination for the Mughal Empire is still there. People like William Dalrymple, have propagated that, that fascination for the Mughal Empire. And actually, as you know, Aurangzeb hated music. He thought that music was un-Islamic. So the musicians that were Hindus who converted to Islam because they couldn't play music otherwise, they had the mock burial. It's also in my book. They had a mock burial of their music instruments because Aurangzeb said, no music in my court, it's un-Islamic. And today also we see that in Afghanistan, that in Pakistan, that even in my country, France, there is a return to that intolerant Islam, to that very strict, rigid, violent Islam, which Muslims feel is a rightful Islam to practice today. So the shadow of Aurangzeb, the legacy of Aurangzeb is very much alive, but it's a legacy of monstrosity, of intolerance, we do not want that world. Aurangzeb is in India, you would say he was an Asuric force, who not only harmed people, but left behind him a legacy that is perpetuating today, not only in these riots in Nagpur, but everywhere where the Muslims riot in the world. They're sheltered, they come to France, they come to England, people give them, Europeans give them either out of guilt or out of goodness, give them shelter, and in return, Muslims riot, and they burn and they kill. So AURANGZEB legacy is very much present today, but it's a legacy of monstrosity. So he's not a unifier at all.
Yeah, it's very strange that a lot of the Marxist and other historians have really tried to whitewash AURANGZEB, and they whitewash it by saying that, oh no, he also donated to Hindu temples, and when he did destroy a temple, it was mostly political and not religious. Those are the kinds of things that they say. And one of the wonderful things I like about your book is this book. In history we talk a lot about primary sources. This book is a collection of AURANGZEB's farmans. This is completely primary source material. In fact, there's very little commentary. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about how this book came about. I know other scholars were involved. You put the whole thing together. I'm just going to show a couple of pictures here. This is a wonderful picture of Dara Shikoh being paraded in the streets, and later on there's a picture where Dara Shikoh is beheaded and his head is brought to the emperor. And so how did these illustrations come about, and what is the actual content of this book, AURANGZEB, which is very remarkable, as I said, because it's primary source material. It's not even, and it's a rare primary source material.
So before I come to that, to show AURANGZEB cruelty, that, as you know, Dara Shikoh was the eldest son of Shah Jahan and the inheritor of the Mughal Empire. He should have become emperor in his own right, but not only AURANGZEB used the so-called apostasy, heresy of Dara Shikoh to have him beheaded, but also he was so cruel that he had the head of AURANGZEB not only brought to him, but also brought to Shah Jahan, who was in jail, so that Shah Jahan, who loved Dara Shikoh very much, Dara Shikoh was Shah Jahan's preferred son, so the suffering of Shah Jahan, just to make his father suffer, he had the head of Dara Shikoh brought to Shah Jahan, who was in bed and ailing and on door's death. Now, the history of are you still with me, Sankrant?
Yes, okay. Yes, I am. Yeah.
This book is interesting because actually, as a very young journalist, I covered Kashmir, the Valley of Kashmir, and I saw the ethnic cleansing of the 350,000 Hindus, which were still there in the 90s, early 90s in the Valley of Kashmir. But people, are very confused about Kashmir. There's the Valley of Kashmir, which has a Muslim majority. There's Ladakh, which has a Buddhist majority. And then there's Jammu, which has still a thin Hindu majority. So I was in the Valley of Kashmir, and most of the foreign correspondents were there at that time, camping in Srinagar, because this was going on. The ethnic cleansing of the Hindus of Kashmir were going on. And there I saw the brand of Islam that AURANGZEB preached, that AURANGZEB left behind him. The Islam where, you're not Muslim, so even though you may come to my festival, you may come to my mosque, even though you may worship in Sufi shrines, you are dead to me unless you flee. Either you convert to Islam, or we kill you, or you flee. So I saw what happened, and then I started thinking, because I was a very innocent Frenchman. I didn't know anything about Islam. I didn't know much about Hinduism. I was very young. So then I started studying in history to understand why this intolerance. How come two people who lived together for so many centuries, Hindus and Muslims in the Valley of Kashmir, the Muslim would just kill, rape, strangle with barbed wire Hindus so that they flee their homeland and leave everything behind. And then I came upon AURANGZEB. So this is where I started looking at AURANGZEB, reading books about him, and eventually I did an exhibition on AURANGZEB, which was opened in Habitat Center in Delhi by Shri Ravi Shankar and Mr. L.K. Advani, who was then the Deputy Prime Minister of India. So this is my story with AURANGZEB. And then I realized while reading history about AURANGZEB that there was no need to condemn him, because AURANGZEB was a very meticulous emperor. He was a very intelligent, meticulous emperor. So whatever order he passed is preserved today, because it was written in Farsi, you know, or and then the emperor himself would put his own seal on things, and they preserved mostly in the Bikaner archives. So I had the service of a professor of Indian history, his name Professor Bhatnagar. He was the dean of the Department of History of the University of Rajasthan in Jaipur. I had his services. And then at that time, there was a chief minister who was friendly to me, who knew me, Mrs. Scindia, and she gave us permission to access the Bikaner archive. So myself and my professor, we went there. We met the curator of the Bikaner archive, a Muslim himself, who was very surprised. He said, "Oh, but very few historians come to consult these firmans." So we gave us access to firmans. We scanned them, many of them, and we asked a team of painters in Jaipur to do in the ancient Mughal style what the firman said. So the one firman is the destruction of the order from Aurangzeb to destroy the Somnath temple. So we had our team of painter, showed the destruction of Somnath temple. One firman is forbidding Hindus to ride elephants, horses, palanquins. So we had painters do that. So what we did, we only used Aurangzeb's order to show him as a monster. There was no need to say he's a monster. His order themselves show that he was a monster. He was a man who killed, who raised, who imposed jizya. So there's a painting on the jizya, how Hindus have to come and pay the jizya to the local collectors. There's a painting of Aurangzeb himself and his elephants trampling Hindus in Delhi protesting the jizya. There was actually a French doctor, Dr. François Gautier, who was a doctor at the Mughal court, who was there, who was present, or in his memory, he wrote a book when he went back to France. And he mentioned many of Aurangzeb's atrocities, like beheading Dara Shikoh. Actually, when Dara Shikoh was very much loved. So when he was paraded, that photo you showed, when he was paraded in the streets of Delhi, people cried. People were crying because they loved him. They knew he was a good man. They knew he was a tolerant man. People were crying. And Dara Shikoh was betrayed by a man called Jivan. So they threw stone at Jivan and they cried for Dara Shikoh because they knew he was going to be executed. So there is no need to condemn Aurangzeb. People like Audrey Touchke or William Dalrymple, or Christophe Zaffalo, they just need to go to the archive in Bikaner and look what Aurangzeb himself ordered, because it is all there, it is preserved. But unfortunately, very few people do that. So the legend of Aurangzeb, the Unifier Aurangzeb, who gives columns to Hindu temples, is alive today, because historians have not cared to look carefully at what Aurangzeb did according to his own record. So my exhibition, which is now in a small museum I have built in Pune, is called Aurangzeb According to His Own Records. There is no need to say he was a monster, because his own records show he was a monster not only to Hindus, but to Buddhists, to Jains, to Jews, because he beheaded a Jew, remarkable Jew ascetic called Sarmad, and to his own family, killing his brothers, beheading his brother, poisoning he was an extremely, extremely cruel emperor. He was a Hitler of his time. And yet in India, people go to worship on his tombs. Books are written about him. So it's very sad. It's very sad. But I put the fault more on Hindus and historians and Muslims, because it is Hindus themselves who have this nostalgia about the Mughals. Mostly Hindus. It is Hindus who go to Sufi shrines when we know history has shown that most Sufis have encouraged conversion of Hindus and Buddhists and Jains, and even encouraged the killing of infidels, most of them, except for Dara Shikoh. And maybe Dara Shikoh, he had 2-3 Sufi teachers, in his time who were intelligent, tolerant people. But after that, and before that, mostly Sufis encouraged conversion. So it is very sad. I'm a great admirer of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. I think he's the best Prime Minister India ever had, and he's a visionary and extraordinary man. But for him to promote Sufism, and promote Khusro, who was very much a man who hated infidels, it shows again that Hindus are good people, but ignorant and innocent. That it's not like that. It's not like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is wonderful. There's actually museum that François has put together. Many people don't know about this in Pune, I believe, François.
In Pune, yeah, in Pune. So Sri Ravi Shankar, we inaugurated many of my exhibitions, because after I did AURANGZEB, then I did an exhibition on Shivaji Maharaj, because I'm a Frenchman. I'm a fan of Napoleon. I was born in Paris near Napoleon's tomb in Les Invalides. So I knew about Shivaji Maharaj. And when I went to Pune to teach an art of living course, I thought there would be a great museum about Shivaji Maharaj, because he's a hero of Pune, of course. Pune was his realm and his birthplace, but there wasn't. So Sri helped me and gave me some land and inaugurated many of my exhibitions. And so finally, I built a small museum in Pune, which has 21 pavilions now, a Bharat Mata temple and library and reception. And there's an exhibition on AURANGZEB, which actually ran into trouble. So another example of the legacy that he left behind, AURANGZEB, that we showed it in Delhi, we opened it in Delhi, there was no problem. Some people said, oh, why do you want to wreck the past? This is the past, leave the past alive, but there was no trouble. But then we showed it in Bangalore, again, Sri came to inaugurate.
I think that Shivaji Maharaj was a vibhuti, he was a divine being that came upon us to defend India, and thus we honor him in this temple.
So wonderful.
Was named by AURANGZEB. He's a Nawab of our court. So he came to see the exhibition because the Hindu had spoken about it. And he was horrified, especially by the painting that showed the raising of the Somnath temple. Though it is a fact, AURANGZEB did order the raising of the Somnath temple, and it was raised 7 times by different Muslims. So the next day, there were some Muslims from the nearby mosque who came and shouted the slogans. And then at that time, Mr. Karunanidhi was the chief minister, and his son Stalin was a very powerful man. So the Nawab of our court, his descendant, called Stalin, whom he knew personally, and Stalin sent one of his best officers who had caught a very famous sandal smuggler, Virapan. So that officer was sent to close my exhibition. The 2 old ladies who were guarding the exhibition, were in prison. The paintings were taken by the police, and some of them thrown on the ground. I was in Delhi. I flew to Chennai. I got the ladies released, but it took me 6 months to get the paintings back from the police of the AURANGZEB exhibition. Many were broken because at that time I used glass, not plexiglass. So I brought them to Auroville, got them restored, and then they're now in the Pune Museum, where they're permanently exhibited. So this shows again that AURANGZEB intolerance is very much alive today, and people admire AURANGZEB not only in Pakistan but also in India, unfortunately. So it's as if there are some people who admire Hitler, but there's a tiny minority. Most people know that Hitler killed 6 million Jews. He was a monstrous man, and he brought catastrophe upon Germany. I mean, Germany recovered now, but it took many years for Germany to recover from the Allied bombing of Berlin. It was a tremendous loss to the German people. So very few people worship Hitler today, but they do worship AURANGZEB in India, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's real tragedy. And one of the things I noticed in your book is that so much of the debates are contemporary. Like, his orders himself show the destruction of the Jagannath temple, of the Somnath temple, Kashi Vishwanath temple, so many temples in Mathura. So what are we debating about? All of his orders are clear. Similarly, forced conversion is very clear, where he's forcing these revenue record holders, they have to become Muslim to retain their position. And then there are all these there is also giving money for the conversion that is happening. And on top of that, you have these a lot of the forcible things that he has done. It's all documented. They're documented in an old format, and there is economic incentives to convert. And it's very unfortunate I just read recently, Karnataka government under the Congress has now started a policy of reservation, 4% special quota for Muslims to get contracts. This reminds us back of Aurangzeb's time when he would use discriminatory economic policies for conversion. And it looks like we are still living in Aurangzeb's era, in the way you were attacked in the DMK, museum, by the DMK in the museum, and then all of this conversion that is going on even today.
Absolutely, Sankrant. But you know what? The fact that Aurangzeb, by his own intolerance, brought down the Mughal Empire, because the Mughal Empire collapsed after him. One of his sons, Bahadur, didn't last very long, I think only a few years, and then the Great Indian Mutiny tried to bring back the last Mughal Emperor, Bahadur II. But as you know, the Great Indian Mutiny failed, and it's wrongly been called the first Indian independence movement, but it wasn't. It wasn't, because the purpose was to bring back to the Mughal throne the last emperor. So for me, it is not at all a war for the first war of independence. But the way Aurangzeb brought down the Mughal Empire, it may be that the intolerance of Islam that we see today everywhere in the world, whether it is in India, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, other countries, will also bring down the caliphate. I mean, the dream that I think the Turkish president has of re-establishing the caliphate, the Sharia upon the world. I mean, every pious Muslim today think that the Sharia should rule the world, that Islam is the only true religion should rule the world, but they're going at it like Aurangzeb did, in such a bullying manner, in such a violent manner, that eventually it might not only bring down the dream of a new caliphate, but it will also make Islam implode, because if Muslims kill a lot each other. I mean, of course, they do kill Westerners, they do kill Indians, but mostly they kill themselves. In Pakistan, as you see, the Sunnis bomb, the Shahs in Iran, the Shahs fight the Sunnis in Iraq. The Ahmadis are persecuted in Bangladesh, so by the Sunnis, by the Bangladeshi Sunnis. So this intolerance, even toward each other, might also, like Aurangzeb did, bring down, the dream of an Islam that dominates the world.
Absolutely. And in this book, again, something very current. There's a farman for conversion of Sambhaji's servants. We just saw in the movie Shava how Sambhaji was tortured mercilessly, and even after all that torture, they were not able to convert. But Aurangzeb gave the order at least to be able to convert Sambhaji's servants that were converted. Again, this book is an absolute gold mine. Just this book alone, with primary sources documenting Aurangzeb's own farmans, Aurangzeb's own orders that are preserved in the museum in Bikaner, that were translated from Persian and painstakingly compiled by François. It's just an absolutely gem of a book. I wish everybody would really get a copy of it, because if it's on your coffee table, it starts that conversation. Because it's a beautiful book. It's very well illustrated. Somebody comes to your home, it starts that conversation, and then slowly, one page at a time, we start to overturn all of the false histories that have been taught to us in all this thing about peaceful conversion, and there was no monetary incentive, there was no force used, temples were not destroyed. All of that just gets debunked completely, not because of an opinion that Francois is putting out, but because of original source documents in Aurangzeb's own words, Aurangzeb's own orders that are saying that we have to destroy the temples, we have to convert the people, we have to behead so and so. There's a illustration of Shivaji leaving Aurangzeb court in anger. I don't know if you remember this one, François, and the story behind that. There's this illustration of Shivaji leaving Aurangzeb's court. So beautifully done illustrations. So I think if you look at the broader context, Francois, and we've seen this in the media, in coverage from Germany and France, a lot of European coverage in the media. Why is it that the West so distorts Indian culture and history and even contemporary events? Even today, I was reading BBC's reporting on Nagpur riots, saying, "Oh, how big bad Hindus were doing all this violence," and you know. So why is this? Why do you think this?
Actually, it's a very the leading light in among the Western correspondents. Now he's not well today, and I think he's a fairly decent man, as many Britishers are. But in those days, he was the leading light. Every Western journalist and Indian journalist looked up to him. So when I was covering Kashmir, Mark Tully was saying,
right?
no, at that time, yeah. At that time, the Indian government, it was the Congress government, was accusing Pakistan to foster terrorism, to train Indian Kashmiri separatists, bring them on the Pakistani Kashmir side, train them, finance them, and push them back with some money into India. So Mark Tully was saying, no, it's not true. It's not a true accusation. It's not true at all. And I felt it made sense. It made sense that it was not possible that these guys came back and knew how to throw grenades, or how to put bombs, how to kill people, how to use guns without being trained in Pakistan. It made very much sense to me, and today it's an accepted fact. But in those days, Mark Tully from the BBC, in those days it was there were TV, but mostly it was radio. So Mark Tully was saying, no, it's not true. Pakistan is not sponsoring terrorism in Kashmir. So people have forgotten that. I haven't forgotten, and I've always thought that the BBC, although the BBC has qualities, some of its documentaries are remarkable, and I do listen to the BBC quite often. So then I started thinking, why is it that Mark Tully and many other Western correspondents have this negative view of India? And then I think that from a Christian point of view, Westerners have consciously or unconsciously, most of the time unconsciously, a feeling of superiority towards Hindus. They think that democracy, that the Western man, that Western civilization is superior to that of the Hindus, who are God worshippers. Let's put it that way. The image of polytheism, although I know that it is not polytheism, that Hindus adore the one into many. There is a strong polytheism itself or herself in many different ways. This is why Hindus worship the one in many different ways. But for Westerners and Jews and others and Muslims, of course, this is polytheism. This is being inferior being. So I think even today, unconsciously most of the time, Westerners think they're superior to Indians, particularly Hindus. They're scared of Muslims, but they're not scared of Hindus. This is also the second problem, that Hindus never retaliate. Hindus never, you can bash up Hindus, you can say what they want. A little more now. It's a little better now. With Mr. Modi came nationalism, came some more pride. But Hindus never retaliate like Muslims or even Christians. So I think that the main reason that people like Mark Tully, who are decent people, still think that Hindus are inferior beings because they feel superior. They feel that. But I came to India very young, and I thought, well, this is a great country. And then I understood. I read Sri Aurobindo, and I understood that Sri Aurobindo is a great philosopher. He was not only a yogi, but he was a great philosopher. He explained very clearly that what is Hinduism, what is in the divine, in the life divine, in the synthesis of yoga, how ancient, how great, that civilization is, from the Bhagavad Gita to the Upanishad, to the Mahabharata, Ramayana, how Hindus understood the world better than anybody else. So for me, it was clear that I had set foot in a superior land, in a land of superior civilization, although colonization and poverty and so many things harm the external body of India, but the inner body is still very much alive. So there was no question in my mind that I had come to a land where truth is still alive. But people like Mark Tully, although I think Mark Tully is one of the better ones, most of the Western correspondents, they stay in Delhi for 4 or 5 years. They fly first class, they go in 5-star hotel. They never see the real India. They never see the real. So, hence, and most of the Indologists, like Christophe Jaffrelot. Christophe Jaffrelot is the head of French Indologists. He's my personal enemy. He's been hating me for a long time. They also analyze India sitting in Paris or in New York or in Oslo or in London. Unless you live in India, you meet the people, you go in the countryside, you see the rural India, there is no way you can understand India. I understand that Aurangzeb was a monster, he was an absolute monster. And if only historians would care to consult the archives where Aurangzeb firmans are kept, if only they would care. Even Indians, like Urmila Tapar or Irfan Habib, they never went and consulted Aurangzeb's. So they are staying, they are just repeating what the British said. There is no true, documentation in the history.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think what is your feeling about there is a revival happening at some level. I think at least some level of awareness is starting to grow, and I know you've also written this book on India, on Hindus, India, Hindus, and Narendra Modi, where you're talking about the changes that have come after Modi's coming. You point to positive changes. You also have some critical views on things that can be done better, which is great. I think it's very important for people who are friendly to have a critical view as well, because otherwise what happens is you only have the left criticizing, and then you keep bending to that criticism rather than also responding to the critique on the other side. So I think it's very important that there be criticism from Hindus and people who are friendly to Hindus as well, because it's a positive thing where we can improve in terms of the government. So what are your thoughts on that, and also how people can become part of this Indic revival and in their own way?
So again, Mr. Modi brought wonderful things to India, and particularly nationalism. One of the things that I felt in my early years as a journalist is that Indians, Hindu, were not proud of themselves. They were feeling that, and we see, every time I'm in Delhi, I see the long queues at the American embassy or at the UK embassy or Canadian embassy of mostly Hindus, queuing to export themselves, the greatest brain in the world. So Mr. Modi has in some way reverted that. So people now, Hindus, especially on social media, you see it on social media, Hindus are more proud to be Hindus. They understand, as I did very young, that Hinduism, the spirituality that props up Hinduism from behind, is very ancient, very wise, and is actually the last spirituality alive in the world. And its tools of pranayama, meditation, Ayurveda, Hatha Yoga, are tools which are already gone into the world thanks to pioneers like Swami Vivekananda or today Sri Ravi Shankar and many others. So there's a wave of nationalism. At the same time, I spend a lot of time in Delhi, but I'm not a friend of Delhi. I think that Delhi is a very ancient place that corrupts people, because the VVIP system put in place by the Congress, by the British first, because the British were, let's face it, there were very few people, and they were able to rule India for nearly 3 centuries from Delhi through a system that you could call, the ancient VVIP system. There were the Saheb, there were the Lords. So unfortunately, the Congress took up that same system, political system, democratic system, judicial system, education system, and just clamped it on modern India. Delhi is the wrong capital for India, I feel. First, it's very far away. If you live in Tamil Nadu or in Kerala or even in Karnataka, it's very far away. people speak a different language from the south. I understand sometimes, you know, the frustration of certain southern states like Tamil Nadu or others, you know, that Delhi being so far, wanting to impose India upon everybody, wanting to impose this and that. Delhi is not the right capital. India needs a central capital, you know, which is approachable from the north and from the south and from the center. It needs a capital where you break away from that British system, you know, of these millions of bungalows in Delhi, you know, of this parliament, which is just worse. I spent a lot of time in Indian parliament in those early years. It's like a fish market, you know, people shout and they behave badly. And, you know, I mean, this is not democracy. So I feel, and I remain a great fan of Mr. Modi. I think that even now he still keeps on doing one of these Kumbh Mela again was something, it happened before the Kumbh Mela, but on this scale, you know, with this favor, and I have friends who are not at all Hindu-minded, but they went there and it was extraordinary. So that is also Mr. Modi. I mean, that's also Mr. But at the same time, Delhi, and the VVIP system is a great harm. It does great harm to India because you lose sight in Delhi of the real India. When you're in Delhi long, and you have so much security around you, and you have so many people, so many bureaucrats, you are disconnected from the people of India. So I tried to say that in my book that you have so kindly published, you know, about Narendra Modi, that the divine grace is upon this man. The divine grace is upon this man, and there is so much that happened with him, and there is so much potential that is there to change India, because India needs a radical change away from all the system that the British left behind, and which, you know, like, you know, court case takes 10, 12 years, you know, there is so much corruption. You know, recently my wife's uncle died, you know, he was in Andhra Pradesh. To get a death certificate, you know, the doctor wanted a bribe. How is it possible in the 21st century when, you know, thanks to Mr. Modi's salaries have been increased, you know, Mr. Modi also tried to bypass the bureaucracy by doing all these direct transfer and all this QR, which is a wonderful things. Corruption is still so much present in India. No? Unless you live in India, unless you are connected to India, you won't be able to do it, because Delhi is a glass tower. Let's face it, you know, it's a glass tower where you think you understand everything, but you don't, because India is vast, complex, and the people of India, you know, need attention, special attention. So again, I still a great admirer of Mr. Modi. But I think, for instance, as far as Sufism is concerned, but it's not the right thing to encourage, because and Hindus are not stupid. They do know that Sufis encourage conversion and killing of Hindus if necessary. So I disagree with Mr. Modi there. I think it's a wrong thing. And again, I put the fault on Delhi, because he wouldn't have said that when he was in Gujarat. When he was in Gujarat, he was right in the center of India. He met a lot of people. I met him also many times in Gujarat. You know? So he had a touch, he had a foot, you know, he had an ear on the ground of India, which he doesn't have. Not his fault. I mean, not his fault. The security, you know, the sycophancy. You know as much as me that how much Indians and Hindus can be sycophants. So I've seen it around gurus. Nobody wants to tell the guru, you know, something which can be a little negative or a little unpleasant, you know. Nobody wants, so everybody keeps praising and praising and praising. So if you praise me all the time, how will I know the truth? So I think this is the case with Mr. Modi now. He's surrounded by yes ministers. There's a British serial called Yes Minister, right? He's surrounded by yes ministers, yes. And he's not able to get an ear on the ground. So I'm a little sad about that, but I think maybe, you know, he's a meditator. You know, he's a man who maybe he'll get at some point he realized that he needs to connect more to the people of India.
Absolutely, and you know what? One of the things that we've done with Garuda books, and what François has been doing tirelessly for so many years, is becoming advocates of Indian culture ourselves in our own works. He's put together this wonderful Chhatrapati Shivaji Museum in Pune. He's been writing all these wonderful books. And so everybody can contribute to this. We really have to take our own step and say, this wonderful book on Aurangzeb that I showed earlier, all of his books, entirely New History of India and Aurangzeb's Iconoclasm. So definitely go out, buy the books, recommend them, like them, share them. And we also have a wonderful giveaway today. We are relaunching our Instagram. So if you can go to the Instagram account, the new Garuda Instagram account, there is also going to be one giveaway to one of the lucky people who comment and follow our Instagram account, a giveaway of François's book on Aurangzeb. Again, it's amazingly beautiful book, and recommend everybody to buy it. Proceeds are going towards helping the museum and all of François' other books for the revival. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for being on our show, François, and may the Guru's blessings continue on you and the fight for Dharma. Thank you so much.
Thank you.